Welcome to the latest in Vendetta Sports Media's NBA season previews for season 2021-22. I'm Jared Prosser. I'm here with Jackson Law, and today we are talking about the surprise vanquished NBA finalists, the Phoenix Suns. Jackson, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I love doing these previews. I love talking NBA. Excited that the season's around the corner. We're so close. Even though we talked about off camera that it's felt like it's been nothing but a continuous NBA season ever since the bubble,
Yes,
but another season's on the horizon, and it's just a fun time to be a sports fan.
it is. It is. So the Suns came out of the blue, a franchise that has been moribund for so long, just an awfully run franchise, just suddenly out of the blue, steal a finals appearance, almost stole a championship. Jackson, tell us a little bit about that season.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, they were a surprise to everyone. They went eight, like they were so far deep in the hole in the bubble for getting into the playoffs. They swept all their bubble games 8-0, and they still
Mm.
didn't make the playoffs. But then here comes walking in Mr. Chris Paul, CP3, and it's like I'm gonna put the team on my back, be the engine that gets this team going, and they got all the way to the finals. Like you said, they were up 2-0 on the Bucks in the finals,
Yeah.
and then dropped four straight. I mean, it was there for the taking. They like CP3 was that close to getting his first ring. Devin Booker, who feels like he's been in the NBA forever, but I think he's actually younger than me, was
Yeah,
that
he's still
close.
only like 16 or something, isn't he?
I
I'm
mean,
always shocked when I see how young
I
he
think
is.
he can finally legally buy a drink at a bar somewhere, you know. But I mean, it was an incredible season. They were had a top 10 offense and defense last season. I mean, that's just that's a championship recipe. If you're top 10,
It is.
not just like in individual categories, but across the board. If you take all categories for offense and defensive analytics and you're top 10 in everything averaging, then of course it makes sense why they made it
Yeah.
to the finals. Now, a lot of people will say they did have some help. The teams they played were severely injured. The Lakers missing a lot of players. The Nuggets missing some players,
Mm.
but it is what it is. I'm all about you got to play the team in front of you. You got to be the better
Yeah.
team for a 7 game series. So I'm just saying that's a criticism some people are going to have, but
No,
I'm
I'm
not going to
with
have
you on
that.
this, Jackson. I'm with you on this, Jackson. The asterisk talk that happens for every single championship, it is bullshit.
No, it,
Like every single champion has a little bit of luck along the way. It's almost a prerequisite for winning a championship that you need cards to fall in your favor. Yeah, Phoenix had some cards fall in their favor, and they didn't quite win the championship, but they came damn close.
yeah,
And
and not only
anybody who
that, but
says, "Well, they played an injured Lakers, they played the Nuggets without Murray," no, I don't want to hear
I
that.
know. We'll think
They
about it
did
this way.
actually.
I'll throw it to another sport real quick.
Hmm.
The Philadelphia Eagles won a Super Bowl with their backup quarterback. The cards weren't in their favor. The cards were technically in the favor of every opponent that they played because they were playing with a backup
Hmm.
quarterback and they still lost. So the cards can be in your favor and you can still not show up.
Yes. Yep. You can only beat what's in front of you. So Phoenix, a surprise championship contender. What changes did they make over the off season?
Well, the good news is they kept their core intact, which was important, which was extremely important. So the people that they lost and the people they added, they were role players that were replaceable, and they got with role players that you could replace with
Mm.
similar type players. The players that they lost, they added similar players. So they added Alfred Payton, made a trade for Landry Shamet, and then they also picked up JaVale McGee, who will more than likely who's turned into like an underrated center over the past 5 years.
A
Like,
low key, very good pickup. I mean, the Bucks just pounded them inside
mm-hmm.
when they dusted off Frank Kaminsky at one point in
Yeah.
the finals. As soon as Dario Saric went down with that knee, they were so undersized. McGee is a low-key, very smart signing.
No, it is because, like you said, all he needs to do is step in for 15 minutes a game for DeAndre Ayton to get a little bit of rest, and he can hold the fort down. He doesn't have to score. He doesn't need to score. He just needs to rebound and play defense. That's what he did for Golden State. That's what he's done for every team. He championship team he's played for. He did it for the Lakers too. And he's not the Shaqtin' a fool.
He's not Wizards McGee anymore. We don't see that Shaqtin' a fool.
No, exactly.
Wizards McGee these days.
Exactly. Yeah. He is a competent big man now in the NBA. Yep. He knows his role and he does it well. So I like you said, I think it's a low key, like a great pickup for them and really fills in a need that this team had. And
so this is a 2-horse race here, but who is the key player for the Suns?
The key player is going to be Chris Paul for me. Mm-hmm. And the reason why it's going to be Chris Paul is it's no lie the guy is getting up there in age. He's 36 years old. Now, what he has going for him is athletes today because of modern training, medicine, medical practices, recovery, the NBA teams spend millions upon millions of dollars just to make sure that their players are healthy and ready to go on game day. And the older and more fragile a player gets, especially someone like Chris Paul, who's had to deal with a lot of injuries, not just his entire career, but especially in the last 4 to 5 seasons dating back to his time with the Houston Rockets, and how there's always the saying, if he doesn't go down, Houston's up on Golden State. Maybe Golden State doesn't go on that, incredible run, and maybe Houston actually has a championship by now. But if ifs and buts were candies and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. It's in the past. It is what it is. But they paid the Suns paid a 36-year-old Chris Paul $120 million over the next 4 years. It is an absolutely insane contract, and he has to continue. He doesn't have to play like an insane all-star level. He just has to do what he did last season, which was make the correct pass and run the offense effectively and efficiently. And if he can do that, the $120 million is still a really high price tag, but he needs to stay healthy and he needs to stay in tip-top shape. And if he can, this Suns team is still dangerous.
Yeah, he basically needs to act as the foil, not necessarily the number one option, but just act as the foil to take that focus, I suppose, that narrative focus, that media focus away from Devin Booker and just let him play ball.
No, I agree. In all the previews and everything, we talked about it going into the finals. No one was ever saying that Chris Paul was the number one option. In fact, I don't even think he may have been the number 3 option on the team. He doesn't need to be that. Now he did have a couple games where he'd surprise you, where he'd hit like 4 or 5 threes. He'd score over 20 points. He did that a couple times in the playoffs, and it's like, wow, that's amazing. I didn't know Chris Paul still had it. I didn't know he still had it in him. That looked like New Orleans Chris Paul. But he, like you said, he just needs to be able to hold this team together. They're a much better team when he's healthy. They did win some games when he was out in playoff games, closing out a series against the Lakers. But they have a better chance of winning and returning to the finals if Chris Paul is able to stay healthy. And it's an interesting turn of events because there's no longer breaks in the season. It's a full 82-game season now. So, and, we've seen where older players like LeBron have benefited from those breaks, or, Mr. Glass himself, Anthony Davis, has benefited from these breaks and these shortened seasons. It's a full season finally again. So that may throw just another wrench in there. It's another factor to think about.
So who is the X factor? Chris Paul's the star man. Who's that swing player for the Suns?
So I went a bit differently here with the X factor. It's not a player as it is the entire team, at least the returning players. It's the finals hangover. when teams lose, especially in a fashion like they did where they were up 0-2, one of two things happens. They either become more hungry than what they were because they were that close. They were so close. So they come out swinging hard. They come out hungry, angry. They play like it, and they are just an absolute menace to society. Or they come out and they're flat footed. They can't do anything. And it's because, for whatever reason, that loss has sat in their head an entire offseason, and they can't get it out. This team cannot.
And there's that emotional lull that
exactly
you get as well.
This team can't afford to do that. You can't afford to do that in the West. The West is too good for that. Okay, one slip up in the West, one bad week is the difference between the 2 seed and the 7th seed in the West. They can't afford to do that. So can they come out and can they not have this finals hangover? Can they get the loss out of their minds, off their backs? And can they just get back to playing what worked for them last season?
And it'll be interesting to see with so many young players, when we talk about Chris Paul and his age, but realistically, the rest of that core group are very young. Booker, Bridges, Ayton, Crowder's a veteran, of course, but even someone like Campaign, Shamet he's coming in from the outside, admittedly, but how that affects that young group. Whether they sit there and go, wow, this is awesome, we want to do this again, or whether they get a little bit lax thinking, well, now that we've made it, we can do this. We can flick a switch, so to speak. And as you mentioned, you can't flick a switch in the West unless you are the very, very best. The Warriors are able to do it. LeBron's been able to do it, but they're the exceptions that prove the rule.
Exactly.
So looking at this upcoming season, Jackson, what are you expecting from the Suns? Where does their record end up? How far do they get into the playoff race?
Vegas has the win total at 51. I think that's pretty good. I think 50-51 is a good win total for them this season. I think the West is always evolving. Teams are always getting tougher, and there's so many wild cards out there in the West. But I do suspect there may be a little bit of a hangover here. So that's kind of the angle that I'm going with. I'm not saying it's going to last forever, but I think they do take a small step back this year. And like I said, the difference between seeds is like a game or two, maybe 3. So that's all, and that's all it is. Maybe they just have a slower start than last season, but then they pick right back up where they left off. But it doesn't matter because the West is the West, and teams are hot and they stay hot in the West. So
do you think that impacts where they end up in the, it might impact their seeding, but do you think it impacts their playoff performance, or is this a case of pacing themselves for the playoffs?
I think they're going to have to pace themselves. I think it's going to be more about pacing themselves. It's going to be finding the right mind to start the season and then trying to see if they can flip a switch. I think they probably get the 4th seed out West. And from then on, it's can they flip that switch? How do they finish the season? Do they go on like a 5-6 game win streak to end the season to clinch the 4th seed? And they're going in hot, which is extremely important when we're talking about playoff runs. There's a team in Major League Baseball right now that's won like 18 of their last 19 games. So they may make some noise in the playoffs because that's just an unbelievable run. But it all, again, you've talked about it in some years before. It all depends on who they're playing, what the seeding is, and it could be random. A game or two again separates seeds. So, but I've just got this gut feeling they get knocked out in the second round. Whoever they play in the second round, being the 4th seed, it's going to be a pretty high seed, and I think it may be a little bit too much for them to overcome.
So a 4th seed and a second round loss for the Suns. That is the call of Jackson Law, everyone. So that will be it for our Phoenix Suns preview here at Vendetta Sports Media. Check us out at the website. Get on the socials. This will also be up on YouTube. So hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. Give us any feedback. Tell us whether we're right or wrong. If you really, really are upset at this, we will give out Jackson's home address. So feel free.
Hey, would it be the first time I've been
us.
wrong? I'm sorry, Atlanta Hawks fans. I'm sorry I doubted your team in the playoffs.
Yeah, no, they're coming from Atlanta with all their pitchforks now. So please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. We will be back as soon as we can with more of our NBA previews. For Jackson Law, I'm Jared Prosser. We will see you next time.